All right. Well, welcome back to the Temporal Eternal podcast. We are so glad you're joining us today. A Temporal Eternal is where we discuss how to live for eternity in our relationships, ambitions, and time. And today we have a special guest with us, Brett Hollis. How you doing today, Brett?
Fantastic. How are you guys doing?
Doing well. Doing very well.
Doing great.
For those of you who don't know who Brett is actually he's been in ministry for quite a few years. We won't age him, but he has been in ministry for a good period of time, and he's currently associate pastor at Park Ridge Community Church in Washington. He's also very much known for being a comedian as well, pivoting to comedy from ministry, and then he's kind of done some ministry as well with that during different seasons. And he's also an author of a book called Welcome Home. And he
real quick, let me just say,
Yes.
Everybody grab your tissues. Y'all might be crying by the time we're done with this of laughter. So,
okay. I was gonna say,
grab your tissues.
don't set the wrong expectations, because I was like, I do not think like tears
Of laughter.
Well, yeah. Now you set it up well, because I was thinking like they're gonna think it's like some emotional. He does have emotional stories as well. But anyways, moving on. So Brett, we start out with a fun activity when we have guests, and it's basically random questions. Brennan, if you want to run our 1 minute timer for this, and I'm just gonna ask you a this or that question, and then you just have to pick what you prefer. Okay?
Okay.
All right, Brennan. Let me know when to start.
No explanation with it. Just a yes or a this or that.
Yes. Correct. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
It's like,
here we go. Ready?
What would you rather have?
Ready, set, go.
Car or truck?
Truck.
Cake or pie?
Cake.
Hamburger or taco?
Hamburger.
Toilet paper, over or under?
Over.
At a movie, candy or popcorn?
Candy.
Beachfront home or cabin on the lake?
Cabin on the lake.
Dog or cat?
Dog.
Football, basketball, baseball, hockey?
Football.
Netflix or YouTube?
Netflix, I guess.
Coffee or tea?
I hate them both.
Mac or PC?
PC.
Pancake or waffle?
Pancake.
Card game or board game?
Board game.
Coke or Pepsi?
Oh, Coke. My goodness, Coke. Yes.
All right, that's all of our questions. Not bad.
Yeah.
That was it. You got through them all. So
I was concerned when you said toilet paper. You paused for a second. I'm like, what are you going to compare this to? What am I choosing? Toilet paper or fern or
pine
what?
cone? That's what I was like. I knew you were like a camper, so I thought, hey, maybe he's gonna go Bear Grylls or whatever, and be like, oh yeah, rattlesnake skin. I don't need a toilet paper. I'm just like, whatever. So, but yeah, man, we're so stoked to have you, Brett. And just when I was actually in full-time ministry at an awesome church called Christian Hills, you came a couple times there and spoke, and also did some comedy. So that's how I met you. And you're, very good friends with the senior pastor there, Pastor Mike McCartney. So you were definitely somebody, when we first started this podcast, I was like, I definitely want Brett on at some point. And I'm so glad you were on today. But man, we'd love for you to maybe share a little bit about yourself real quick. Maybe that I didn't cover in your intro. And then we'll just kind of pick your brain a little bit about God, about life, about laughter, and all those things.
All right. Sounds good. I live in Washington State, born and bred here. On August 1st, I will have been married 30 years. We have a 27-year-old son and a 25-year-old daughter and a 23-year-old son-in-law and a 4-month-old grandbaby. I just became a grandpa 4 months ago, so we're enjoying that. I love to hunt and fish. I love to read. I love to eat. And let's see. I love to travel. I like to be able to help people get a smile on their face, know what God's done for them. I'm the youngest out of all.
Favorite thing?
What's that?
What's your favorite thing to eat, real quick? What's your favorite thing to eat?
Steak and potatoes. Steak and potato.
There you go.
You give me a good juicy steak, man. You bet. That's what I like. What about you? What's yours?
Matt, what's your favorite
Mine's
type
the
of food?
same, actually.
All right. All right.
Steak and potatoes.
I thought he was gonna say the amusement park. What's it called again, Matt? We've never talked about this on the podcast, but let's just go for it right now. What's it called, Matt?
It's called Kings Island, and I can get anything I want. So
So Matt basically lives next to a Six Flags, for context for you, Brett, and all of our listeners, and he has the food pass annually for Six Flags. So like literally, homie will go at least 5 times a week and get 8 times a week, and we'll get like a free meal. And these are actually good meals. But those food passes are for like, hey, they think they're gonna use them like 4 times a year when you go to do Six Flags. Not Matt, man. He's like,
He just eats corn dogs every day,
bro.
for
He's
every
like,
meal.
no, it's good. Like there's pork.
Chick-fil-A.
Yeah, there's real good food.
Really? So,
Yeah.
Matt, let me ask you, do you have free pass for the rides, or did you just want the food?
So I get it for Christmas. So I get it for free for both of them. So, I mean,
That's impressive.
no grocery bill. No grocery bill. It's all
Part of me wants to ask your weight, but I don't want to be too personal here on this podcast.
No, I'm not too big. Not yet. Maybe one day.
If they ever tell you you're not going to fit on this ride, you know it's time to ask for something else for Christmas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Time to take the food pass away. You can keep the ride pass, but then the food pass might have to retire once you get to a certain point. So
that maybe someone from we'll just speak in faith that the podcast is going to spread more, and someone from the company is going to catch wind of this, and they're just going to blacklist him, and he'll never be able to do it. So
yeah, your face is going to be on a poster eventually. I mean, like, let's just be honest.
Exactly.
I'm getting
Do
ready to
not
start
admit.
traveling. I'm getting ready to start traveling in a camper. I can go to any of the Cedar Fair parks and use the pass. So,
Ooh,
wow,
that is cool. That's really cool.
Yeah, he's working the system there, but yeah, I mean, I think to just dive into kind of your story, Brett. Man, I would love maybe real quick, and then we'll kind of talk about your 2020 because you have some interesting things that you have gone through. But I'd love for people to kind of hear just your Jesus story, right? Like how you came to God. What did that look like for you?
Yeah, I grew up in church. In fact, I have great memories. A lot of people I've talked to didn't have good memories in church. I had great memories, but I grew up ever since I was 3 years old, and every Christmas and Easter play, and Mom was the pianist, and my dad was a deacon and usher and all that. But it was all a social thing for me. Church really, I mean, I never won the games in class. You know how they have the Bible contest and then you get candy, right?
Yeah.
I was that kid that never got candy. There was one girl looked like it was Halloween every Sunday. She'd come out there with a bag full of candy because she was super smart, which she's a doctor now, go figure. But I never really caught on to all the details of that. In fact, I had a teacher, a Sunday school teacher, that even though I was not serving the Lord, I prayed every single Sunday on my way to church. But I prayed that no one else would show up, because if I was the only one that showed up, he'd take me to breakfast. And that was just kind of that was the launch of my praying, adventure as a kid. Anyhow, long story short, grew up in the environment. I know I had touches of the Lord along the way that I can recount even now as a little kid. But when I turned 18, I just was running. I had been running for a number of years through junior high and high school. And although I attended church, I rebelled quite loudly wherever I was. And it led to a point of just despair and depression. And I go hunting a lot, and I was going elk hunting with my uncle in Eastern Washington. And although it was not a pre-planned deal, I was out in the woods one day with my rifle, and I had had enough, and I was going to end my life. And while I was out there, I got so angry at God, and I was screaming at him. And if you're there and you love me like everyone says, and you're there for me, then why is my life like this? I was just hurting on the inside. And at the time, I didn't realize why I was hurting so much. But I can tell you now, looking back, I know it was simply because I was avoiding him and running from him, and I was running from my call. And anyhow, I stuck the rifle to my chin and did not pull the trigger, because as I was getting ready to, I was so full of anger and I was shaking and so forth. I all of a sudden just felt this calmness, because I'd yelled out to God, "If you're really there, then take me home, because I'm lost." That's, in fact, that's what my book is about. This little book called Welcome Home. It's called that because I wanted him to take me home. Well, uh, I felt this calming peace come over me. I put the rifle down and I looked down, and this is where the story gets really strange, but I saw a pathway in front of me that I hadn't seen before. I had been hunting in that area for several days and had not seen it before. And I followed the path, and the path led, I'm narrowing this story down just to save time. But the path basically ended with a very clear vision of Jesus out in the woods.
Wow.
And he reached out his hand and he smiled at me and he said, "Welcome home, Brett. Welcome home." And I sat on a stump. There was a stump out in the woods there. And it was really weird because it was the middle of fall. And so everything was dead. It was November and the grass was dead, everything. But where I had this vision of the Lord, it was all green grass, and there was green grass, and there was flowers and a stump, and I just sat on that stump and I bawled like a baby. And I couldn't remember the last time I had cried. I was 18. I was trying to be cool, trying to be tough, and I sat on that stump and I bawled like a baby. And when I finished crying, I didn't even know how long I had been crying, and I got up and I felt like I needed to get back to my uncle. I was supposed to meet my uncle. I looked at my watch and I had actually been out there for about 3 hours.
Wow.
And I headed back to the truck and I met my uncle, and jumping ahead a little, I never told my uncle about it. And jumping ahead, we were staying in a hotel that night, and I got back to the hotel and I locked myself in the bathroom and I stared in the mirror, and I remember just staring in my eyes, knowing I should have been dead. I should have been in hell. I mean, just the way I talked to God, I was cussing God out and all that earlier that day. And the next day we had one more day to hunt, and my uncle asked, "Where do you want to go?" I said, "I want to go back to where we were." I still never told him anything. We parked where we had the day before. He went the same way he had the day before. I went the same way. And I could find my cigarette butts. I could find my footprints, my boot prints, but I couldn't find this trail. And when I walked the area where I knew I was, there was no green grass. There was the stump I sat on, but there was no green grass. And then it started to snow really heavy. And as I was walking through the snow, I got up on this old road where the trees had grown over the road, and it was really dark and muddy, and I was walking, and I just started talking to Jesus like he was right there. I mean, I had this new sense of his presence that I'd never had, even growing up in church all those years. And I was just talking to him, and I was trying to think through all of the things I learned in Sunday school. How do you receive him? How do you get saved? Right? So I'm just start praying all these things, and I remember stopping. This wasn't an audible voice, but I remember in my heart feeling like him saying, "Look back the road you just came from." And I looked down to my left, and the trees had grown over, and so it was dark, but the snow had landed on top of the trees and was dripping down, and so it was making it all muddy. And I felt like he just said to my heart, "That's your life. That's what you have to show for it. You can keep walking that way, but that's all you're going to have. Or you can start walking with me, and this is what I'll give you." Well, I hadn't planned it or anything, but the trees had ended right there. And when I turned to my right, the mountain road, it was an old logging road, went up through the woods, and it was pure white snow. Like no animal had walked on it yet. No one had driven on it. And everything in my heart just exploded. And I said to him, I'm yours. I want to do whatever you want me to do. I want to serve you. And I came off of that mountain a totally different person.
Wow.
Than when I went up the mountain. And I have friends to this day that they still are surprised that I'm doing what I'm doing because they remembered the old Brett before I went up the mountain, and I'm a totally different person. It was really like a Saul on the road to Damascus type of experience for me, you know.
That's incredible.
So, yeah, I'll tell you one cool part about it. This is in my book I wrote, but my I didn't tell it. I got home and I had decided before I went in there that I wouldn't tell my parents because I was 18. Right before I left, we got in this huge fight. My parents and I got in this huge fight, and I wasn't going to share. I don't know why. I wasn't going to share this with them. I thought, well, I'll just be a secret Christian. And I opened the front door, and I burst into tears. I turned into this wallowing baby. I burst into tears, and I yelled for my mom, and I ran upstairs to my room, and she comes up and, what's going on? What's going on? Well, I told her what happened, and she's crying and I'm crying. And I said, well, don't tell anyone though. I want to be the one to tell people. And she said, all right, she promised me. Well, the next morning I come downstairs to have breakfast and the phone rings and I answer the phone and it's my grandma who used to be a missionary. This woman is a praying warrior, right? And my grandma, this is so impacting to me. She says to me, honey, this is Graham again. She says, now I want you to tell me what happened this weekend. And I said, well, what do you mean what happened this weekend? She says, honey, I didn't sleep all weekend. The Lord had me praying for you the entire weekend. And he told me, he promised me he was going to do something to change your life this weekend. Now I want you to tell me what he did. And I just started bawling again. I mean, it just started all over. It was just waterworks coming out of my face. And that was the beginning. That was the beginning of my life taking a whole different direction than it had been up to that point.
Wow.
So, yeah.
That's incredible.
Well, there's always a story behind a story, right? You see someone and you think, oh, they've been doing it their whole life. I was a totally different person back then. And God had a different plan for me. And I was running from him. That was my thing. I was running from him, you know. So.
No, I think it's fascinating to hear it too, because you don't realize, where somebody comes from. And so it's a couple different things happen with these sort of situations is one, like you're saying, people, this should be its own topic sometime, Brennan, we should talk about it, but people judge you by your most recent reference point. And so for you, people look at, comedian Brett, or if they want to make fun of you even more, they'll look at you as Pastor Brett, right? Did you get it? Anyways, I'm not as good as Brett there. I just try to do a dad joke or something, like
I got it.
Mock you more as a pastor than the comedian. But anyways, but they look at you in this spot, and then they don't realize where you came from, don't realize what God's done in you, and don't realize like you have a past. You've had hurt, you've had all these issues, because they kind of see where you're currently at. In the same way, as you referenced at the kind of beginning of your story, there are people that knew you, and they're most, like, I remember I'm from Boston originally. I was a class clown. I got kicked out of classes. I got suspended. I would be like Chia Boy. I ate a lot of Cheez-Its. I was just like a goofball. I would crump, you know what I'm saying? Not well, but just to be funny. It looked like I was just having like a jumping seizure. But whatever.
This surprises me, No,
100%. But people have that reference point, and then when I went into ministry or started serving God, they didn't recognize me because, and then you talked about, Saul and Damascus, right? Like in the New Testament, the early church didn't recognize Paul because their most recent reference point was this person that persecuted the early church and Christians.
Right.
So I find it fascinating because a lot of times we have these preconceived notions, these assumptions, and even us as Christians can have that too. And the danger of it is we don't know where people came from. We don't know, you might judge somebody and go, man, what is wrong with them? And you go, dude, you would be they shouldn't be alive. Like
Mm-hmm.
they shouldn't even be here. And how dare you
Mm-hmm.
ridicule these little things that they are slowly trying to work on when you
Right.
have no idea how far they've come. Or
Yeah.
in the same way you go, and this is something that really has to convict and challenge me is, how dare we put a box on somebody's life or look at somebody with insignificance because we have no idea how much, of course, God loves them, but the calling and the purpose that he has created for their life that might be bigger than you. And because you think, oh, well, I'm so much better, or I'm not going to waste my time with this person, they actually might make a greater impact in God's kingdom than you ever would. And
Yeah.
you're just, you're putting almost this box on somebody. So I know that's a little bit off base, but it just kind of, really makes me think about that when I think about your story and just even some of those things that you said, Brett, where it's just like, man, like, let's be careful that we don't do that, and that we're fully open to the Holy Spirit to use us
Yeah.
for others.
Well, and something I've really learned over the years and have been chewing on is the idea that God's, like God says to Jeremiah, I knew you before you were born. I know the plans I have for you. I've created you to be this prophet and so forth. One part of my story that is not in my book, and I don't believe I've ever shared it publicly, but the night before I left to go elk hunting, I had a very, very vivid dream that I was living up in the mountains. I was a loner. I was depressed. I had long hair, and of course, I actually I had a mullet at the time, so that wasn't too strange. But in my dream, this friend came up to get me out of the woods. It was almost like an intervention. And they came to get me out of the woods. I said, no, I'm not. I can't go back. I can't. And they said, no, you need to come back. Anyhow, they talked me into coming back. And the next part in my dream is I'm standing before this large audience on a stage, and everybody's laughing.
Hmm.
And then the laughter turns into tears. And some of it's because they're laughing, and some of it's because there's some things hitting them. And then I woke up. Well, what I realized later was that dream was kind of a God dream in my life, because
Yeah.
it was like Jesus was that friend. He brought me back. I'm now doing stand-up comedy, which was a dream of mine since I was 8 years old. And it all is coming full circle now in my life. And that's one of the reasons
Wow.
I never belittle little kids when they tell me what they want to be when they grow up, because I feel like there are dreams that God puts in these kids' hearts
Yeah.
that's exactly what they're supposed to be. And I waited several years before I told even my family that I wanted to do stand-up comedy. But that was a dream that God had put in my heart long ago. And now to see things like that happening and go back to, I was ready to take my life. But I had a grandma that wasn't going to, I don't even, at the time it freaked me out that she said this, because I didn't know God did that. I didn't know,
Yeah.
like, he could work the grandma and then do things to me at the same time, that kind of deal. But man, that's one of my heart's passions is I love to encourage people of all ages, but I love to encourage kids in their dreams
Yeah.
and in what's in their heart, because I know that God has a plan for them, and a lot of those desires that they get, even as a little kid, that's really God putting that in them.
Yeah. No, and I think that's such an incredible part of your story, and just to even hear that, I think that's such an encouragement, and those listening, maybe you're at a point where you're in a place like Brett, where early on, for him, he was at the point of just feeling like it was the end of his rope and he was just done, and probably feeling like God had given up on him and he was just done, and God totally turned that around. But that's incredible that God would give you that dream too. And you started actually pursuing more stand-up comedy within how many of years of recent? Is it the last like
Oh, yeah,
5-6 years?
I've been doing it 10 years now. I started
10 years. Okay. Yeah.
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 Now,
no, I'll let you
just
now,
to
I guess. Yeah.
clarify, so you said 10 or 11, right?
Yeah.
But no, 5 of those were when he was actually funny, though. So, like, there's, and that's a really good. Just want to clarify.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and this is just to encourage everybody, right? Like, you want to be a dancer, you can probably learn dance faster than it took Brett to be funny. And so, like, so I get the question though, Brendan, because that's spot on. It's like when Brett started making you laugh
Exactly.
5 years ago, but when his journey at like comedy,
Donald, not everyone can be like you and go from 0 to comedy.
I know.
To perfection.
I
That's
tell,
it.
if y'all can relay that to my wife about how amazing I am and how I don't have imperfections, because for whatever reason,
Yeah.
it's
we'll make a phone call. Yeah.
Speaking of imperfections, would I be correct in saying Matt bailed out because he doesn't have a beard? I know he has the hat, but I was looking at all of us right now thinking maybe he was starting to feel left out. And I don't know him the way you do, but maybe you want to reach out to him.
Yeah, I'll message him. I think he had like, he's saying like Wi-Fi issues or whatever. Honestly, on the scale of our host, sense of humor, that's not his spiritual gift. So I think he felt a little bit out of place.
No, guys, he's just eating Chick-fil-A at the theme park. That's it.
Yes, that's right.
He's just using the pass.
Yes.
I wish this is a joke. Like he really does use it that much. Like this is.
He's going to use it so much. You know how they have these rides where you have to sit in the seat first, and if you're bigger than that seat, you can't go on the ride. They're probably going to set some up at Chick-fil-A or whatever. Sir, we're going to ask you to sit in the seat. If your butt is too big, we're going to ask you not to eat here anymore.
Yeah.
Okay, we need to,
100%. You only get 3 waffle fries today, Matt. Okay, you only get 3 waffle fries and 1 pickle on that sandwich, because it's just we got to cut you off. But it's like a bartender, right, when they're doing shots or whatever, and they're like, okay, we got to cut you off. It's like the same thing that's probably happening there.
I have to say, I think he's pretty brilliant, though. If he has tapped into that and he doesn't have to make dinner and all that every night.
100%.
That's
hey,
pretty smart stuff.
Don't hate the play, hate the game. I mean, that's 100%. He's working it, man. Everybody who's like mad about it is just mad because they either don't have that deal near them, or they're just not as smart as Matt. But well, I wanted to make sure too, because Brennan had mentioned, again, this is probably within the last 5 years where we talked about the funny years, but just kidding though. Brett's hilarious. He's been funny forever. He knows I'm joking. I vicariously lived through. So I've always wanted to do like acting and comedy since I was younger or whatever. So when Brett started doing comedy, I was like, oh my goodness, like that, when I heard about somebody doing that, so I kind of vicariously lived through him. So anytime I'm in a conversation with him, my humor comes out even more just because it brings me joy. But Brendan had said that just kind of was sharing a little bit before recording it, just about kind of your crazy COVID year in 2020 and kind of your job and stuff. So I'd love to hear some stories and just some stuff that happened.
You've had some career and job changes and things like that, haven't you?
I have. You know what was funny? So I left pastoring 10 years ago to go on the road full time doing the comedy and evangelism. And when I first started out, things were kind of rough. I mean, it was a huge transition, and I wasn't getting a lot of work. But by 2020, it was the best year I had for my calendar. I mean, at the end of 2019, my calendar looked. It wasn't like every weekend wasn't full, but it was getting full. Like I was super pumped up about it. I did a comedy tour from Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. I did a couple shows in Idaho, a show in Spokane, a show, so I kept coming closer to the west side of Washington. It was a great tour. The next week, I'm sitting there having dinner with my family, and our Governor Inslee, comes on the TV, and he announces that we're shutting everything down because of this COVID thing. That was a Sunday night. By Tuesday, 2 days later, I'd lost all my work for the year. Wow. So every phone call I got, every text I got, every email, I knew. Every time my phone buzzed, I knew what it was. In fact, because I always try to look on the bright side, I just started laughing because I was either going to laugh or cry every time my phone came up because I didn't know how I was going to make it. I mean, I was frustrated because I had come to this point where I felt God's the one that put this dream in my heart, and it was going so well. It was finally taking off.
Yeah.
And then I lose everything. And my daughter was getting married that year, and all this stuff. Well, long story short, I had to get a job. So I get a job at the largest mortuary in North America. It's not only the largest mortuary, it's the largest crematory as well. So let's see, I would come in there every week. I would work I'd work 12-hour shifts. I'd work 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. And my official title was removal technician. Now, I didn't have business cards that I handed out or anything, but my job, what the removal technician did is I removed dead bodies wherever they were. So if they're at their house or a hospital or the medical examiner's office, didn't matter. I removed bodies, and I went all over the state of Washington. Our company was contracted by most all the funeral homes in Washington. So I spent 14 months removing bodies every night. And I removed well over 400 bodies and was dealing with death constantly. The owner of the company knew I did comedy, and he knew that I also had a show called Die Laughing, which has always been in a funeral-like setting with a casket. I have my own casket at home here, and I use the casket. I have flowers, and it's this show where I tell jokes of life, death, and afterlife for about an hour, and then I end the show with a small little presentation of how you can die laughing if you know Jesus, and then I end it with a joke, and the show's over. Which, by the way, guys, I've done that show twice in a funeral home here in Washington on Halloween, and it really went well. I mean, the place was, and I just got back from Wisconsin. I just did that show at a funeral home in Wisconsin, and we packed the house. I mean, I had people tell me they came because they never heard of a funeral or a comedy show in a funeral home. So it was a real draw.
It's amazing.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
It was a lot of fun. So the owner of this company, he comes to me and he goes, "Hey," he'd say to me every once in a while, "Hey, you getting some good material for your show?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm getting some good stuff." And then he would say, "Well, just remember, you can't use names or addresses, but you can use anything else you want." And I said, "All right, that sounds good." And so I just collected. I would write down stories. I have some really, really gross stories. I have some unusual stories. I have some sad stories. But God he used the experience to give me a lot of material. I mean, this show I just did a couple weeks ago, I got a lot of fresh material there. But in all of that, there was one night, this is probably what Brennan might have been referenced. I think I shared this at Christian Hills Church. One night I got angry at God because I was 50 years old. I felt like I lost my vision, died right in front of me. Like I had this vision to do comedy and it just died in front of me. I was making less money than I've ever made in my entire adult career. My kids were both making more money than me. All of my nephews and nieces were making more money than me. And as a 50-year-old, living in America, we feel like we have, we're supposed to be at a certain spot in our age, right? Like, oh, by 50, I'm going to be close to retirement and should be at the height of my career. Well, I went from having a good career pastoring, a good career as an evangelist, a good career as a comedian, to picking up dead people. And this one night, I got so angry at God. I was frustrated because I had to take bodies to this one funeral home, and every funeral home had their own rules and things you had to do. And this one that I had to go to, so it was 2:00 in the morning. I had to go downstairs in their morgue, in their little basement there. There's other bodies laying in the room, and they had this checkoff list of what you had to do when you drop a body off there. And so what you had to do is we had to put the body on a particular table. We had to put a block behind its neck to keep its head supported. We had to open up the body bag so it was open all the way down to its navel to keep it open like that. Then I had to take a jar of the stuff called kaolin cream, and I had to take a paintbrush, and I had to paint their face with kaolin cream. And what this kaolin cream does is it makes their skin softer, so when the mortician comes in the next day, he can work with their face easier.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. I'd blow up. I'm at this funeral home by myself at 2:00 in the morning, and I get so angry. I'm Bob Ross in this face. I've got happy cloud for eyebrows. I'm doing all this, and I just say to God, "Are you kidding me?" And I get angry. It's the middle of the night, and I'm like, "Is this all I'm worth to you? Really? Not only am I making less money than I've ever made in my entire life, I am now painting dead people. This is the only thing I have to offer, is to paint the face of dead people." And I was so mad. I was like, "What are you doing to me? What did I do?" And I'm trying to recount every sin I ever did in the last 50 years that would lead to this, right? I'm like, man. So I remember getting in my van when I was done. I go back to the morgue, and because I had to drop off another body at our morgue, and I get out and I open our one of our cooler doors. We had 3 coolers, and each cooler held about 200 bodies. So we had about 600 bodies in there at any given time. I open this cooler door, and I see just nothing but bodies as far as the eye can see. And right then, it was like God just smacked me across the face with this epiphany. And it was, he brought Romans 4 to my mind, where Paul is recounting Abraham's life. And basically he says, I'm just referencing it, but he says, I'm the God who raises the dead, and I am the one who calls things that are not as though they are. And I'm standing there staring at this cooler with this overwhelming sense of, I get it. Now I know why I'm here. I'm here to discover the power of the resurrection of the dead. Because I look in this room and I say, it's done. It's over. These bodies can't do anything. And God can look at that room and say, I can raise any one of them I want right now. And so for me, it was this life-changing, impactful message that I knew at that moment. What he was trying to teach me through all this, one of the lessons was, the resurrection has always got to be in my sight. It's always got to be the backdrop of everything I do. It doesn't matter if I'm doing comedy or I'm pastoring or I'm picking up dead people. If we forget the resurrection, we forgot everything that the Bible's about. And so it was really impacting. So from that time on, I had a whole different perspective while working there. I still had fun. I joke about, I thought about getting involved in some weightlifting competitions because I got really good at the deadlift, and all these different things. And the owner of the company was telling me that his wife is a nurse at one of the big hospitals in Seattle. And he says, yeah, whenever I'm at parties, he says, my wife hates it when I say this, but he says, we'll meet other couples and the couple will go, oh, what do you guys do? And my friend will say, well, I own a mortuary and my wife's a nurse. And then he says, so basically what that means is at the end of the day, one of us had a good day at work. And his wife's always like, I hate it when you say that. He's like, well, it's true. Either you revived him or I put him away in a cooler, But there were, I had some funny experiences out there with bodies and all that, but the impact I walked away with after 14 months, because I couldn't understand it. I didn't know why God was doing this to me, but that meltdown that I had took me to a new understanding of the resurrection. And from that time on, I've just seen, and it wasn't just the resurrection of the bodies. Like, it wasn't just Jesus' resurrection, and it wasn't the fact that we will one day be resurrected. There was the vision I had can be resurrected.
Yeah.
Like I felt like the Lord was telling me, you feel like your vision has died in front of you.
Yep.
But I'm the God who calls things that are not as though they are. And if I can raise Lazarus from the dead, and I can raise Jesus from the dead, who are you to say that your vision's dead? I can raise your vision from the dead. So
Yeah.
it was very, very impacting for me. I didn't enjoy the job. I didn't enjoy what I was doing, but I did enjoy the people, not the dead ones, the
I was
live
gonna
ones.
say, okay, yeah, okay, yeah.
But
It's
it
an
was
interesting way to look at it.
it was fun though. There was a time that I had just picked up a body, and I was really, really hungry, and I went through this drive-through late at night, and I get up there, and the gal goes, I'm in this van. You can tell there's a body in the back, and the gal goes, "Anything else for you?" I said, "Karen, you want anything? Are you hungry?" And it's just fun to just see people's reactions. They don't know what
They
to
don't know
do
how to
with
react. Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
man.
No, and I think it's good too, because even though, like it's always like glass half full, right? And so like for you, there was probably some hit and miss shows, but like you were, you were able to do jokes and comedy and not hear any boos for many months. You know what I'm saying? Because it was just a good crowd for you, so it was good practice. But no, I think
Yeah, yeah, I killed, man. I killed.
you killed it, man.
Dead silence, man.
Yeah, they were you dropped them dead, man. They just I mean, we can pun it the rest of the podcast and just like
Good.
yeah, oh man.
I,
But
I'll tell you this one story. I show up to this house, and it wasn't even a house. It was a mobile home park, but where the guy lived that died was a little camper, just a little tiny like hunting camper. And his son, the guy that died, is like 85. The son out on the porch, he's like 60. And I get there, and the son's distraught, and he's, I'm just trying to be, comforting. And the son goes, "Yeah, he's in there. He's in the back of the camper there." And he says, "Oh, before you go in, I should probably tell you we've had a slight infestation of ants, in the camper." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." So I go in there. This guy is so covered in ants. Like he's naked, and let's just say ants are making their home. And he was so covered in ants that I thought he had hair, but he was bald, and there were ants covering his head so much. And I'm
Oh my
like, now I'm
goodness.
there saying to my coworker, "Slight infestation? What is that Latin for incredibly terrible infestation of ants?" So as we're wrapping this body, ants are coming up my clothes, going
Oh
on my
my goodness.
thigh.
Wow.
We had to bag him up. The camper was so small we couldn't get the cot in there, so we had to drag him in the body bag through the camper. Ants are everywhere. I get in my van. I'm heading back. My coworker calls me later screaming. She says, I was driving to the next call, and she said, "I thought I had like a piece of bread or something like left on my lip because," she says, "I went like this, and she goes, "It was an ant."
Oh man.
It's one thing, like it would make me laugh if she ate an ant, but it really makes me laugh knowing where this ant's been. And she was,
Oh. Oh my
she was
goodness.
absolutely disgusted. So you might want to edit this out. I don't know, but that's kind of what I dealt with on a regular basis. Is you would walk in, you had no idea what you're walking into.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it was
Wow.
sometimes it was very. I had a lot of hoarder homes. There was a lot of stuff you had to deal with. And so it was not a fun job, but it really taught me again, God can take a vision that seems dead and turn it around. And it was also a test to me. If my call in life is to help people laugh, no matter what they're going through.
Yeah. No matter
And
what the
I'm
stage
not
is.
able, yeah, and I'm not able to laugh because I'm doing a job I don't want to do. What's
Yeah.
that say?
No, true.
My message has to be in
Wow.
me first before it can be in anyone else. And so that was another thing for me is like, I can't stand on a stage and say to people they should be laughing through their trials if I can't even laugh through a job I don't like.
Hmm.
I mean, that's,
No,
so
it's
Yeah.
true.
What a testament to, like, sometimes there's things and seasons in our life or things we experience where, sometimes God will allow that where things need to die off maybe in our life, whether it's a mentality or an attitude or just our surrounding situation. And so many people have experienced that the last couple of years. But what an encouragement, I think, to people to say, hey, what are those things that maybe happened or are different or are now dead in your life? But what is God reviving out of that? What is he resurrecting out of that? What is he, bringing back maybe those dreams that he's put in people's lives that you've put on the shelf for years and God never told you to put it down,
right,
And so it's like
right.
getting back to that place where it's like, what do you truly, what has God truly called you to do? And like you just said, who are you really doing it for? And that's so important just to keep in perspective. And I think that's just such a good encouragement, I think, is to remember, not only what are you doing, but what are some things that maybe God is taking and saying, hey, this needs to die off in your life so that I can bring something new, and that's just incredible.
Yeah, and that's a great point. Thank you. I know that for me too, is I was hoping my kids, they're both adults and so forth, but I was hoping that they would see sometimes you just got to do what you got to do to pay bills, right? I mean, we tell people all the time, have vision, what's God calling you to do? But we know, the three of us know,
Yeah,
sometimes there's some stepping stones to get to where you really want to be.
for sure.
And there are times you're just going to have to do things to pay the bills and not just sit at home and sit on your hands. And then there's other times I kind of experienced both of these in that I did something I didn't want to do to pay the bills, but I also was being obedient to God because God, I knew, I mean, that's a whole nother story, but I just knew I was supposed to do this. And that's why I was starting to take it personal at the basement of that one funeral home. Like, why? What did I
Yeah.
do that this is what you want from me?
Yeah.
This is crazy.
Mm.
And by the way, let me just tell you this. God provides so much. I made less than I've ever made and then at the end of that year, I paid for a wedding. I never missed a bill, and I had more in my savings than I'd had in like 6 years.
Wow.
Wow.
God was faithful. I mean, he
Yeah.
was so faithful,
Yeah.
So
No, I think as we kind of wrap up the podcast today, it reminds me too, and not to say I think my story is a little bit different than you, but I also find it fascinating where sometimes where we can even where something could feel like it died, right? Like where your kind of your comedy career kind of took a little bit of break because of COVID, like your opportunities. And so in a lot of ways, even for me, like, so I stepped out of ministry because I wasn't in the right spot. I wasn't in the right spot with Jesus. And my relationship with God was really secondary to my talents, my gifts, me doing the work of the Lord rather than spending time with the Lord of the work. And so for me personally, I was building something that God wasn't building, right? And so so when that got taken away, I thought, well, like I'm probably never going to preach again. I'm probably never, going to be at any capacity of ministry, let alone like this podcast or anything like that. And it just showed like, hey, as when God's behind it, he can resurrect a vision. He's going to be the one that fully does that. And so like, even for you, I bet, there was probably some challenges because you had been doing it for so many years and you had been building it with God, but still building it. And then a lot of that stuff with gigs and comedy and churches and all those things and different clubs and all that, you build that clientele, you repeat all that stuff. And if it's gone, it's like, is it a reset? Will I ever get that back?
yeah, yes,
And God, right, with resurrection power I mean, the amazing thing about the favor and the grace of God is that he can bring it back like it was never gone. He can bring it back better than we could ever fabricate, right? Or push ourselves. And that really is something that just kind of stuck out to me is, and that was a little similarity in my story where I'm like, okay, I was in a totally bad spot, and I was just like, well, I don't think this is ever going to happen. God's like, no, like my calling and the dreams and vision I gave for you initially is still valid. We just needed to reset some things. But I could, being in your shoes, think about like losing that and going like, it took me years to build this up, and now it's like, where is it at now?
Yeah. No, that's, and by the way, I've served with both of you guys, and both of you guys have the hand of God on your life, and you both have so much to offer. And so I hope that you will just be encouraged by that, whatever you're doing, whether it's podcasts or pastoring or serving in any way. You just be who you are. That was, I know we're wrapping up, but I got to just say, I did an event at a church a few years ago where I preached on a Sunday morning, all of their services, 3 services. And as far as I know, no one gave their hearts to the Lord, as far as I know. I come back that Tuesday night and do a comedy show for their community, and 7 people come to Christ. Well,
Wow.
one of my favorite stories is in the Old Testament where God's telling Moses to build the tabernacle. And he says, I have anointed these guys as craftsmen to build this. My spirit is on them to build this. And the powerful thing with that is the same spirit that was on Moses to lead was on these guys to do craft work for the tabernacle. So I feel like you just got to be who you are in Christ and let Christ use you, whether you're a plumber or a preacher or whatever you are. You just make that Lord, and that's where that anointing flows, and it'll be good.
100%,
so good.
100%. Yeah, the title, the stage, right, is really not God's concern. It's really just somebody who is open and available and sensitive to the Holy Spirit, and is saying like, God, here am I, use me, and God will. And I think that's an encouragement for everybody, right? Is you don't have to be the most talented. The perfect example is Brett right now, like no matter what, if God can use a donkey, if God can use Brett Hollis, the Lord can use you.
Oh man.
How come you're not opening for me? Or how come I'm not opening for you?
Dude, one day I've actually thought about it when I was still at Christian.
Hey,
I
look
actually
at that.
thought about doing like an opening for you or something, just to like try. And I don't even know if I'd even have material, but just to try it, try it one time.
Right. Here's what we do: you open, Brennan will film, and we'll have a big old party.
That sounds good.
There you go.
That sounds good. Oh, awesome. Well, hey, this was awesome. We'll definitely love to have you on again, Brett. If that would be something you'd be open to, and and we just want to thank you for listening. If you guys want to follow more Brett, look him up, Brett Hollis. Most of his pictures, he's smiling or in camo. So just so you know, he might be hidden if you get what I'm saying. But his website is thebretthollis.com. And Brett, thanks again for joining us. We appreciate your time, man.
Thank you guys. This was a real honor. Thank you.
So, well, all of our listeners, once again, we are on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube. Leave a positive review on Apple and Spotify, and we will see you guys next week.
Only positive.
Yeah,
positive. Right. I know Brett's on, so if we have some honest ones as well today, that's okay. So, all right. Thank you, guys. See ya.
Bye. Thanks.